The Yuan Sect, known as the most powerful supersect within the Eastern Mystery region, boasted a scale that surpassed even the Tao sect. Within the vast territory of the Yuan Sect, over a dozen dynasties existed, all viewing the Yuan Sect as their supreme ruler. Even the succession of monarchs required the approval of the Yuan Sect. In this region, the Yuan Sect was undoubtedly the true overlord. The territory where the Yuan Sect resided was called the Yuan Domain. In this domain, the disciples of the Yuan Sect held extremely high status. When they visited any dynasty, even the emperors had to greet them with utmost respect. At the center of the Yuan Domain stood the Yuan Sect itself, and deep within its grounds, 3 enormous mountains hovered in midair, radiating beams of light that illuminated the entire sect. These 3 mountains were considered sacred by the disciples, for they were where the 3 great heads of the Yuan Sect secluded themselves for cultivation. Focusing on the rightmost mountain, deep within it stood a weathered stone tower with a broken top. The tower bore the marks of passing time, appearing both ancient and worn. At the peak of the tower sat a figure dressed in a purple gold robe, cross-legged in meditation, as still as a statue. Strangely, there was no visible fluctuation of primordial energy around him, but if one paid close attention, they would notice that the flow of energy in the entire area seemed to pulse in rhythm with his breaths. Time passed in silence, until suddenly, a faint cracking sound echoed. The meditating figure slightly moved, and after a long period of stillness, his eyes slowly opened. Boom! As his eyes opened, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and fierce winds swept across the mountain, causing the trees to thrash wildly. The figure's silver hair swayed, and his deep eyes, filled with the wisdom of ages, contrasted sharply with his face, which was as smooth and pale as that of a newborn, creating a strangely harmonious yet unsettling appearance. With a slow motion, the figure extended a hand from his sleeve, revealing 3 shattered jade fragments. Faint, ghostly faces could be seen on the fragments, those of the 3 elders of the Yuan Sect who had been killed by Lin Dong and his companions. The silver-haired man gazed at the broken jade pieces, a glimmer of light flashing in his profound eyes, a light capable of piercing through the heavens. Someone dares to kill the elders of my Yuan Sect? I'm quite curious to see who this bold figure is, he murmured, a faint smile crossing his lips. As he closed his eyes once more, a beam of golden light shot from his brow, tearing open the fabric of space. The golden light transformed into a shadow, which slipped into the rift. Meanwhile, at Demonic Sound Mountain, 4 figures hovered in the air, surveying the aftermath of a bloody battle. This Demonic Sound Mountain had a terrible reputation for committing evil deeds. Wiping them out today can be considered a good deed, Little Mink remarked with a smile. Lin Dong chuckled before turning his gaze away. Let's leave this place and find a safe spot to refine the Earth Core Spirit Nectar. Right. We've caused quite a commotion here. It won't be long before others arrive. While the destruction of Demonic Sound Mountain isn't a big deal, the real issue is those 3 from the Yuan Sect. If news of this reaches the sect, they'll surely be enraged, Huan warned. Lin Dong nodded solemnly. The 3 they had killed were no ordinary individuals, and it was likely that the Yuan Sect wouldn't take their deaths lightly. They needed to leave quickly before trouble caught up with them. With that thought in mind, he gestured for them to move. His figure transformed into a streak of light, shooting away from the mountain range. The others, including Little Mink, followed closely behind. As the 4 disappeared, the area returned to an eerie silence, broken only by the lingering stench of blood that permeated the air. Time passed, and after half a day of quiet, the space suddenly rippled, and a golden light stepped out from a rift in the sky. The figure's gaze swept across the battlefield below, pausing on the spots where Shun Yun and Xia Yin had been annihilated. Even their essence spirits were completely shattered. How efficient, the golden figure muttered, his eyes narrowing slightly. With a casual wave of his hand, the entire Demonic Sound Mountain collapsed with a deafening roar, sinking into the earth within moments. However, do you really think you can escape? After crushing the mountain, the golden figure turned his head in the direction Lin Dong and his companions had fled, a faint smile on his lips. tearing open another rift in the void. He vanished once again. Far away from demonic Sound Mountain, for streaks of light shot across the sky, leaving sonic booms in their wake. Suddenly, one of the figures halted mid-flight. The other three quickly followed suit, looking back in confusion. "What's wrong?" Lin Dong asked, puzzled. Little Mink's expression had turned unusually serious, his earlier smile completely gone. His eyes were fixed on the distant horizon, as if trying to see through the very fabric of space. "We're being tracked," Little Mink said in a low voice. At his words, Lin Dong and the others instantly grew tense. "Heh, someone's chasing us through the void. Quite the skill. It might even be one of the three heads of the Yuan Sect," Little Mink said, his eyes gleaming with cold light and a smirk forming on his lips. Lin Dong's eyes narrowed, his face growing grim. He hadn't expected the Yuan Sect leaders to have such powerful abilities, tracking them all the way from the Yuan Sect. "What should we do?" Little Flame asked gravely. "Lord Mink may not be able to defeat him, but if it's a matter of escaping, he won't be able to stop us." Little Mink laughed coldly. His hands formed a series of seals, and a vortex of purple-black light surged from his body, creating a rotating array in front of him. The space around the array seemed to tremble and crack. "Let's go." With a wave of his sleeve, Little Mink propelled the group into the array. The formation spun rapidly, tearing open the space, and in a flash, the group vanished. The area fell silent once more. After about half an hour, another rift opened, and the golden figure from before emerged. "Spatial travel, impressive," he remarked, his gaze fixed on the spot where Lin Dong and his group had disappeared. His brow furrowed slightly, and he muttered to himself, "You've piqued my interest even more." With a wave of his hand, a glowing mirror appeared before him, casting light over the area where the array had vanished. The space rippled, forming a dark tunnel as the mirror illuminated it, trying to trace the direction of Lin Dong's escape. However, just as the mirror of light continued its search, dark clouds suddenly gathered above, and a bolt of lightning shot down from the sky with lightning speed, striking the mirror and shattering it instantly. "Who?" The sudden change caused the golden figure's expression to shift, and he shouted sharply. Yet, there was no response to his yell, and the dark clouds in the sky quickly dissipated as if the entire scene had been nothing more than an illusion. The golden figure's face darkened as he stared at the vanishing clouds, then glanced at the space rift that had also disappeared completely. Even he had lost the ability to track it any further. Humph! Realizing he could not pursue any longer, the golden figure let out a cold snort, glanced icily at the sky, and then turned and vanished from sight. At the same moment, deep within the Dao sect, thousands of miles away, in a bamboo house, EngSubs opened his eyes calmly. A hint of mockery appeared at the corner of his lips. In the remote, uninhabited mountain range of the northwestern region of the Eastern Mystery Domain, a quiet space suddenly flickered with purple-black light, and soon after, four figures emerged from the light array and landed on a mountain peak. As the four descended, they all exhaled deeply, their faces filled with caution as they gazed back at the space from which they had just escaped. "Did we shake them off?" Lin Dong asked, looking at Little Mink. Little Mink frowned, deep in thought. The person chasing us was indeed one of the three heads of the Yuan Sect. While we were spatially transferring, I sensed he was using a secret technique to track us. However, that technique was later interrupted by someone. Interrupted? Lin Dong was taken aback. Someone dared to interrupt the secret technique of one of the three heads of the Yuan Sect? Yeah. The one who intervened is also very powerful, certainly not an ordinary person. But I don't know who it was, or why they helped us, Little Mink replied with a furrowed brow. Lin Dong also frowned, pondering for a moment before his gaze sharpened, and he looked toward EngHuan. At that moment, she too was glancing back at him with her bright eyes. "Master! Father!" Two voices rang out almost simultaneously. In the Eastern Mystery Domain, there were only a handful of individuals capable of thwarting a figure as powerful as the head of the Yuan Sect, and among those, the one most likely to help them was none other than EngSubs. Oh? So it was the head of the Dao sect? Little Mink paused before realizing and then smiled. Seems like he's a decent guy, lending a hand from the shadows. Lin Dong shrugged, glancing at Huan. He thought to himself that Xuanzi had likely intervened because he had brought Huan and the Heavenly Phoenix Zither along. In retrospect, taking her with him was a wise move. Otherwise, they would have been in serious trouble today. While Lin Dong wasn't afraid of much, he understood that, with their current strength, confronting the head of the Yuan sect head-on was like an ant trying to shake a tree. However, if Xuanzi had sensed their danger, he likely also knew what they had been up to. We've been spied on. Lin Dong's expression turned slightly awkward. Seeing this, Huan averted her gaze, looking a little guilty. She had a pretty good guess as to how her father had been able to sense them. It was likely due to the imprint he left on the Heavenly Phoenix Zither. Seeing her guilty expression, Lin Dong couldn't help but chuckle. After a moment's thought, he grasped a glowing orb that encapsulated Elder Zhang's essence spirit. Little Mink, can you set up some defenses? I plan to erase the consciousness from this essence spirit completely. Otherwise, the head of the Yuan sect might detect something, Lin Dong said, his cautiousness heightened after experiencing the terrifying abilities of the Yuan Sect Leader. All right. Little Mink nodded. The earlier events had indeed been alarming. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "You've still got Nirvana pills in your cosmic bag, right? Because the sect has a Nirvana pill river, I haven't used much of what we obtained in the ancient battlefield. There should still be over 20 million Nirvana pills," Lin Dong replied, tossing his cosmic bag to Little Mink. Only that much? To set up a grand formation, I'll need at least 40 million Nirvana pills, Little Mink said, frowning. Upon hearing that, Lin Dong nearly spat blood. He stared at Little Mink incredulously. 40 million Nirvana pills to set up a formation? Was this guy trying to skim off the top, or what? If they hadn't known each other so well, Lin Dong would have suspected him of embezzling. Come on, you know who we're dealing with here. If we don't disrupt the flow of primordial energy completely, the moment you wipe out Elder Zhang's consciousness, that Yuan Sect Leader will sense it, Little Mink explained with a sigh. Lin Dong was speechless. After a moment, he muttered in frustration, "That's all I've got." Little Mink, equally exasperated, hadn't expected Lin Dong's reserves to be so meager after all this time. Little Flame, observing their frustrated exchange, rubbed his head but wisely stayed silent. After all, managing Nirvana pills was never his responsibility. His job was to fight and cultivate. "I've got some Nirvana pills," a voice chimed in from the side. The young girl blinked her large eyes and then tossed a red cosmic bag to the pair, who turned to her in surprise. Little Mink caught Huan's cosmic bag and scanned it with his spiritual energy. His brows immediately shot up in delight. As expected from the daughter of the head of the Dao sect, there must be at least 40 million Nirvana pills in here. 40 million. Lin Dong rubbed his nose and looked at Huan, saying, "Who knew you were such a little rich girl? Jealous, huh?" Huan wrinkled her delicate nose and giggled. Lin Dong's face flushed slightly. He couldn't help but feel a bit off balance. After all, he had fought tooth and nail to amass his meager fortune, while she casually tossed out more than he'd ever owned, relegating him to the poor category in an instant. Ignoring their banter, Little Mink flicked his fingers, and a torrent of crimson Nirvana pills surged from the cosmic bag like a massive red dragon, coiling in the sky. The pills began to rotate, releasing waves of terrifying Nirvana energy that caused the surrounding primordial energy to tremble. Even the space itself began to distort. Gradually, beams of light descended from the sky, enveloping the mountain where the force stood. "It's ready." Little Mink clapped his hands and nodded to Lin Dong. Lin Dong's expression grew serious as he raised the glowing orb in his hand. The black energy surrounding the orb quickly began to disintegrate. Whoosh! As the black energy dispersed, the orb suddenly burst open, and a golden light shot out, attempting to flee. "Where do you think you're going?" Upon witnessing this scene, Lin Dong merely smiled faintly. He opened his mouth, and an ancient black rune shot out, appearing above the golden light. The rune quickly transformed into a swirling black hole, releasing a powerful devouring force that enveloped the golden light. Devouring power? You possess the devouring ancestral talisman? As the golden light was gradually sucked into the black hole, a sharp, terrified scream pierced the air. If you dare to refine me, our sect master will surely sense it, and none of you will escape. Facing death, and yet you still talk so much nonsense. Lin Dong's eyes turned cold, and with a swift change of hand seals, the black hole's rotation accelerated, its devouring force frantically corroding the essence spirit and erasing the consciousness within it bit by bit. No, don't erase my consciousness. I don't want to die. As the ruthless devouring force continued its invasion, Elder Zhang's consciousness was gradually obliterated. His agonizing screams echoed continuously, but Lin Dong remained unmoved, his cold eyes focused as the devouring power systematically erased the last remnants of the consciousness within the essence spirit. While Lin Dong operated the devouring ancestral talisman to eliminate Elder Zhang's consciousness, Little Mink's gaze briefly flicked toward Huan before quickly withdrawing. Since Lin Dong chose to use the devouring ancestral talisman in her presence, it showed he trusted her. Knowing Lin Dong's cautious nature, Little Mink understood that he wouldn't trust others lightly. If he did so now, it meant that he already regarded her as one of their own. Lin Dong's erasure of the consciousness lasted for most of the day. Only then did Little Mink sense that the consciousness within the essence spirit had been completely wiped out. Buzz. At the moment the consciousness within the essence spirit vanished, a faint, obscure ripple burst out, attempting to spread. However, before it could expand, the light descending from the grand formation in the sky blocked it entirely, dissipating it into the air. Even in death, they refused to rest peacefully. Little Mink gazed at the scene with indifference, secretly relieved that they had set up a formation. Otherwise, this ripple would have been detected by the Yuan Sect Leader, forcing them into another round of fleeing. Phew! Lin Dong sat cross-legged, and with a gesture, a brilliant orb of golden light flew out of the black hole, landing in his right hand. Simultaneously, he clenched his left hand, and the earth core spirit nectar, shaped like a golden infant, appeared. Exhaling deeply, Lin Dong held the now consciousness-free essence spirit in his right hand, and the golden infant-shaped earth core spirit nectar in his left. He closed his eyes slowly, preparing to use both objects to begin condensing his primordial spirit for the first time. From the sky, countless rays of light from the grand formation poured down, enveloping the entire mountain. Within the formation, Lin Dong sat calmly, gripping the essence spirit and the golden infant in each hand. Streams of rich golden light seeped from both objects and continuously flowed into his body. As the golden light surged into him, a faint golden arc appeared on the surface of Lin Dong's body, and an unusual ripple of energy began to radiate from him. Little Mink observed Lin Dong as he entered a deep state of cultivation, nodding slightly. Although Lin Dong had yet to produce a single trace of primordial spirit power within him, with the assistance of a life mystique stage expert's essence spirit and the earth core spirit nectar, there was about a 70% chance he could successfully condense his primordial spirit. You too should also take the opportunity to refine your earth core spirit nectar, Little Mink said, glancing at Little Flame and Huan with a smile. Understood. Little Flame immediately nodded, sensing the abundant primordial energy in the area and knowing that with Little Mink guarding them, it was an ideal place for closed-door cultivation. Without hesitation, he withdrew to a nearby stone platform, sat down cross-legged, and summoned his earth core spirit nectar. Its dazzling golden glow even coated the surrounding green leaves with a thin layer of golden dust. Huan glanced at Little Flame, holding her own earth core spirit nectar in her delicate hands. However, she hesitated for a moment, a faint look of deep confusion flickering in her bright eyes, so brief that even she didn't fully register it. But that emotion lasted only an instant. Huan quickly nodded, closed her eyes, and entered her own state of cultivation, clutching the earth core spirit nectar in her hand. Little Mink's gaze shifted from Little Flame to the young girl nearby, and his brow furrowed slightly. As a heavenly demon mink, he possessed an extraordinarily sharp sense of perception, and he had caught a fleeting, strange, and obscure fluctuation from Huan's momentary confusion. She hadn't noticed it, but little Mink had felt it clearly. This girl isn't as simple as she appears on the surface. Little Mink muttered to himself. The fluctuation had been so obscure that even he couldn't fully grasp it. He didn't know what it was, but it was evident that the girl before him wasn't as simple as she seemed. Perhaps even she wasn't aware of it herself. Still, little Mink didn't dwell too much on it. As long as Huan didn't harbor ill intentions toward Lin Dong, he had no reason to be concerned. Time passed quickly as the three of them entered deep cultivation. The sun rose and set, and before long, a month had quietly slipped by. During that month, little Mink hadn't left the mountain peak, keeping watch the entire time. This remote area remained desolate, with only the occasional bird passing overhead, making it the perfect location for their secluded cultivation. Such desolation was precisely what Lin Dong and the others needed. Within the grand formation, little Mink sat quietly, his gaze fixed on Lin Dong. The essence spirit and earth core spirit nectar in Lin Dong's hands had dimmed by half over the past month. Yet, as they faded, the golden light enveloping Lin Dong's body grew increasingly radiant. From a distance, it appeared as though he was encased in a layer of golden armor. Despite the growing intensity of the golden light, the expected signs of Lin Dong's primordial spirit forming had yet to appear. He still hasn't fully saturated his essence core. Little Mink frowned slightly as he observed. Condensing a primordial spirit required the essence core to reach full saturation, and without it, the primordial spirit could not be born. Buzz. Buzz. Under little Mink's watchful eye, the golden infant and the essence spirit in Lin Dong's hands continued to dissolve into streams of golden energy, flowing into his body through his hands. If someone could see inside Lin Dong's body at that moment, they would witness the golden energy surging through his meridians before converging at the golden essence core floating in his energy core. Above the essence core, a swirling black vortex hovered, radiating powerful devouring force. The streams of golden energy flowed into the vortex, where they were refined into even purer golden light, which then flowed into the gleaming essence core, enriching it further with every passing moment. As the overwhelming flow of energy surged into his essence core, the core began to expand at a visible rate, and even its surface became more radiant and profound. However, despite the gradual changes in the essence core's size and color, the anticipated breakthrough, the shattering of the core to give birth to the primordial spirit, had not yet occurred. Lin Dong remained calm, observing the scene without too much disappointment. He knew that his current strength was only at the 6th Nirvana stage, a level at which he couldn't even naturally produce primordial spirit power, let alone successfully condensing a primordial spirit. Even with the assistance of a life mystique stage expert's essence spirit, forming a primordial spirit was still far more difficult for him than it was for someone like Huan. At this point, all he could do was remain patient and wait for the right moment when everything aligned. Thus, Lin Dong waited for another half a month, but when that time passed, he discovered something unfortunate. He had completely absorbed the earth core spirit nectar. This is like feeding a pig that just eats and doesn't grow. Lin Dong looked helplessly at his essence core, which had absorbed so much energy but still hadn't undergone any substantial change. He cursed inwardly, knowing that without more earth core spirit nectar, it would be incredibly difficult to condense his primordial spirit with just the essence spirit. After a few curses, Lin Dong sighed, realizing he had no other options. Just as he was about to end his cultivation, he suddenly felt a cool sensation in his hand, and another powerful stream of earth core spirit nectar energy flowed into his body. The unexpected turn of events left Lin Dong momentarily stunned. Then, as realization dawned, warmth filled his heart. Each of the four of them had one portion of earth core spirit nectar, and by now, Little Flame and Huan had likely used theirs. The only one who might still have some left was Little Mink. Lin Dong let out a deep breath, gradually calming himself and releasing the frustration from earlier. He refocused and began quietly absorbing this second portion of earth core spirit nectar. This time, the absorption process took only a week. When the final traces of energy from the second Earth Core's spirit nectar merged with the primordial spirit power and flowed into Lin Dong's golden essence core, which now occupied half of his energy core, a faint tremor finally spread through the core. Buzz. As the subtle tremor echoed within his energy core, Lin Dong's attention instantly shifted. His mind, filled with excitement, was entirely focused on the trembling essence core. The surface of the essence core had deepened into a radiant golden hue, now resembling a brilliant golden egg. And that golden egg was now quivering incessantly. Crack. As the essence core shook wildly, a faint but crisp sound suddenly rang out. Tiny cracks began to form on the surface of the golden core. Crack, crack. The cracks spread rapidly, quickly covering the entire surface of the essence core. From within those cracks, beams of golden light began to shoot out. Seeing this, even Lin Dong couldn't suppress a surge of excitement. After feeding this glutton for so long, it had finally begun to respond. The golden light intensified until it reached its peak, and then, with a sudden burst, the entire essence core shattered. Golden light roared through Lin Dong's energy core like a tempest. As the light swirled, Lin Dong's consciousness remained tightly focused on the core, where, amidst the blinding golden glow, a tiny golden figure, about the size of a palm, slowly emerged. The moment that golden figure appeared, Lin Dong's body trembled violently, and a profoundly mysterious sensation arose within him. In that instant, he felt his soul and body separate, yet they remained intricately intertwined, connected by countless invisible threads. This is the primordial spirit? Lin Dong stared at the tiny golden figure within his energy core, murmuring to himself in awe, his voice tinged with barely contained excitement. Golden light surged throughout his energy core, and the palm-sized golden figure, as if reborn from the flames, began to stretch its miniature body within the radiant glow. Buzz. As the small golden figure extended its limbs, the once outwardly expanding golden light suddenly froze and then, in a dramatic reversal, shot back toward the golden figure, merging into its tiny form. Shoo! When the last trace of golden light fused with the figure, its once translucent body became slightly more solid. The golden figure, now clearer, closely resembled Lin Dong in both appearance and features, except that it was countless times smaller. This gave it a somewhat endearing and innocent look, which stood in stark contrast to Lin Dong's usual demeanor. Although Lin Dong had successfully condensed his primordial spirit, it was still quite ethereal and incomplete. Compared to the fully formed primordial spirits of life mystique stage experts, his was clearly inferior. However, the advantage was that Lin Dong was still only at the 6th Nirvana stage, meaning he had plenty of time to refine and strengthen his primordial spirit. This would greatly benefit his eventual breakthrough into the life mystique stage. Within his energy core, the tiny primordial spirit, having absorbed all the golden light, slowly descended until it sat upon the dragon's spirit wheel below. It crossed its legs and, mimicking a cultivation posture, formed a set of intricate hand seals. Boom! The moment the primordial spirit formed the cultivation seals, a strange rumbling noise echoed through Lin Dong's body. A powerful torrent of energy erupted from the primordial spirit, surging through his meridians like a rushing river. As the energy surged through his meridians, waves of energy also poured directly into Lin Dong's Nirvana palace, stirring up massive upheavals within his mind. Buzz. Buzz. Golden light enveloped Lin Dong's entire body, filling every corner of his energy core and Nirvana palace. He could clearly feel his primordial energy and spiritual energy skyrocketing at an astonishing rate. This was the feedback of the primordial spirit. With the essence core now gone, the primordial spirit had taken its place. As the new center of power, the primordial spirit was undoubtedly far superior to the essence core. For instance, a technique that once required the essence core to expend significant energy now only consumed half that amount with the primordial spirit. The difference between the two was vast. Boom! Surges of primordial energy and spiritual energy rampaged through Lin Dong's body and Nirvana palace. Under this explosive growth, Lin Dong soon felt an invisible barrier in front of him, blocking the further advancement of his energy. Sensing the obstruction, Lin Dong smiled softly, and a low murmur, filled with a hint of fervor, quietly echoed in his mind. Breakthrough? Boom. At the moment the murmur echoed in his heart, an intense, scorching wave of energy erupted from within him. The black flames of Nirvana surged violently from his very flesh, wreaking havoc throughout his body. The Nirvana tribulation had finally arrived once more. The rampant black Nirvana flames wreaked havoc within Lin Dong, while faint azure scales emerged across his meridians and bones, resisting the ferocious heat of the flames. Swish! At the same time, the primordial spirit, which sat cross-legged on the dragon spirit wheel in his energy core, slowly opened its eyes. Golden light radiated from them, carrying a distinct, powerful pressure that rippled outwards. With a slight lift of its tiny hand, golden beams shot out from the primordial spirit's palm, sweeping toward the black flames. Wherever the golden light passed, the black flames seemed to weaken, as though being suppressed. Clearly, the existence of the primordial spirit was of immense help in dealing with the Nirvana tribulation. As Lin Dong worked to handle the Nirvana tribulation within him, he suddenly felt a shift in his surroundings. His figure, seated atop the distant mountain peak, slowly opened his eyes after what seemed like an eternity. The moment his eyes opened, Lin Dong's gaze turned skyward, where dark clouds were gathering. Silver streaks of lightning flickered within the clouds, accompanied by the rumbling of thunder. The wind and thunder tribulation. Lin Dong looked up at the dark clouds, but his eyes showed no sign of surprise. It seemed that the simultaneous arrival of two tribulations no longer fazed him. Thick black light surged from the top of Lin Dong's head, transforming into an enormous ancient rune. The rune rotated, morphing into a black hole that shot into the layer of clouds. Boom, boom. As the devouring ancestral talisman charged into the clouds, the thunderous roar of lightning reverberated through the sky, causing the entire mountain peak to tremble. Yet, not a single bolt of lightning descended. This guy has become much more proficient in using the devouring ancestral talisman, Little Mink remarked with a chuckle as he watched the scene unfold. Beside him stood the towering figure of Little Flame, who had evidently emerged from his own cultivation state. Judging by his aura, it seemed he had benefited greatly from this recent session. It seems the wind and thunder tribulation won't pose any problem for my big brother, Little Flame grinned. Little Mink nodded slightly. With the devouring ancestral talisman in hand and Lin Dong having successfully condensed his primordial spirit, even with both the Nirvana tribulation and wind and thunder tribulation coming at once, there wasn't much left that could trouble him. As expected, the devouring ancestral talisman, barreling through the wind and thunder tribulation, rapidly consumed the violent energy within. In no time, the thunderous power began to dissipate at an astonishing rate, clearly devoured by the talisman. Boom! With one final rumble of thunder, the dark clouds in the sky completely dispersed. The devouring ancestral talisman shot back, returning to Lin Dong's Niwen Palace, followed by a surge of immense spiritual power that spread out like a storm, centered around Lin Dong. As this overwhelming spiritual power expanded, Lin Dong's eyes shot open, and he slammed his palm heavily into the ground before him. Boom! A massive crack instantly tore through the earth, snaking across the ground and stretching all the way to the edge of the mountain peak. The entire peak began to shake violently. The rampant primordial energy and spiritual energy roared around Lin Dong. His eyes shone with golden light for a moment before the brilliance gradually faded. Phew! The blinding golden light disappeared, and Lin Dong exhaled deeply, releasing a breath filled with scorching heat. He then stood up, his body crackling with energy. The sound of his movements reverberated like the rumbling of thunder, as an immense force surged within him. 7th Nirvana Stage, Six-Seal Heavenly Talisman Master. With the successful condensation of his primordial spirit, Lin Dong's strength had skyrocketed once again. Not bad. Little Mink scanned Lin Dong with a glance, surprise flickering in his eyes as he smiled and nodded. Thanks, Lin Dong grinned at Little Mink. That Earth Core Spirit Nectar wasn't too useful for me anyway, Little Mink replied with a light chuckle. Then, his gaze shifted toward another direction, a look of mild surprise flashing across his face. But compared to you, she's the one we should be more concerned about. Hearing this, Lin Dong was startled. He quickly turned his head and his pupils shrank at what he saw. Seated on a distant stone, the girl who had previously had her hair tied in a ponytail now had her black hair spread out, and it had turned into a strange, icy blue color.